Hi, I'm Pamela Southwell, the author of Super Freak, Lessons of a Reluctant Psychic. I thought I'd read a few pages of my book for you today, so sit back and enjoy. Chapter 1, Welcome to My World. My dad walked in wearing his Canadian Armed Forces uniform. As he entered the kitchen, he took off his hat and neatly tucked it under his arm. The buttons on his coat were shiny and gold. He looked tall and imposing and handsome in his uniform. It was about 4 p.m. and my sisters weren't home from school yet. I was not more than 2.5 years old, sitting in my high chair having something to eat. I remember the nausea and the tightness in my belly had let up from earlier that day. My stomach felt much calmer. My dad had asked my mom why I, the baby, was eating so early. We had usually had our suppers as a family. I heard my mom explain that I hadn't eaten all day, as I had been vomiting earlier that morning. Since I was feeling better, she wanted me to have something, and I think that something was scrambled eggs. I specifically heard my mom telling my dad that I hadn't eaten anything since breakfast. As I was scooping up some egg, I remember thinking, "What's breakfast mean?" And then I heard a man's voice in my head, and a big round clock was being shown to me with thick black numbers. It was over a meter away in my direct line of sight. I remember being able to see the wall clock through it. I understood the idea of the clock and recognized what numbers were. I understood. Then he said to me, "Breakfast is when you eat before the hands on the clock show you this." And the clock's face showed two hands pointing straight up the 12. I looked at the clock and remembered replying, "Oh." Thus began my life as a super freak. My super freaky life. Dreams that come true, seeing things that other people can't, knowing things that other people don't understand, hearing voices that always tell the truth, and catching glimpses of what's to come have always been part of my life. Feeling what other people are emoting, sometimes even hearing their thoughts, and traveling in my sleep also started in my childhood. This is who I am. As I've grown older and more experienced, I found out that I can read any kind of energy, and everything is energy. I also have what I call my little voice, who tells me almost anything I ask it, and often when I don't ask. Of course, the man's voice who told me what breakfast meant that day when I was 2 has always been there as well. But it wasn't until I was about 12 years old that I finally figured out who he was, and not until I was in my early 30s could I admit my abilities, that they truly exist. I spent the first part of my adult life in rational denial and trying to disprove these talents. I didn't want to be weird. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have super freakiness thrust upon them. I'm sharing this true story of my life with you. Besides the fact I think it is kind of interesting, I want to give you what I never had, somewhere to start. I hope I can offer a helping hand to anyone who's gone through anything similar. I'm going to share with you what my mentor told me. You are not crazy. And I assure you, you are not alone. Everyone has some element of extrasensory perception. It's just that some of us aren't afraid of admitting it anymore. Just like someone who suffers a trauma, you wish to share your story with acceptance and like-minded people. I was born in the far north in Moose Factory, Ontario. However, I grew up in a small northwestern Ontario town, Sioux-Lookout. It's about 5 hours west of Thunder Bay, well, the way I drive anyway. Sioux-Lookout was, and in some ways still is, considered an isolated community. I only grew up with one channel on television, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Our library was small and the internet didn't exist yet. I also didn't have access to the internet at my own home until I was about 35, and because of that, I had very little access to any information about what was going on with me. As a youth, I had a job at the library, and I read every book about ghosts that I could find. But those stories were mainly about how people were afraid of ghosts because they were being tormented by them. It was at the library, too, where I looked up the symptoms of schizophrenia because I was hearing so many different voices in my head. As a child, I watched every movie about ghosts that the late night movies on CBC aired, and I still remember the movie, The Ghost and Mrs. Muir. It was burned into my thought that ghosts were just like people who were alive, and that felt truthful down to my core. When I was in high school, my town only had a population of about 2,500 people. Our grade 13 graduating class had fewer than a dozen people. Everyone knew everyone else, and as a local, you were probably related to half of these people. So I was afraid to share with anyone. It was bad enough that I thought these experiences were irrational. I didn't need someone else to support that observation. The questioning mind. I would constantly torment myself with questions like, how can anyone possibly see the future? How is it possible to hear a complete sentence out of the blue when no one else is around, and the advice of those words are absolutely on the mark? How can the information you've been given over the years not just be right once or twice, but correct every single time? How can a person have dreams that come true? How come sometimes when a word is written or spoken, whether in casual conversation or heard over the airwaves, you can see the words and they glow gold? What the hell? None of these seemed rational at the time. None of it made sense. But then what? Being a logical, curious person, I knew there had to be a rational, reasonable answer. As a little girl, I understood the fundamentals of Darwinism before I knew who Darwin was. I believe and still believe that Mother Nature has a purpose for every single little thing on the planet, whether we humans understand what's going on. I figured someone else must be looking after the rest. The only thing I had was myself and my experiences before eventually, after many years, I found a few good books to help me sort out this information. And finally, some great people came into my life and helped me out too. Until that time, I had to figure out what this was about pretty much on my own. Childhood. When I was in elementary school, my father was stationed at the Canadian Forces Station of Beausejour, Manitoba. We lived in the trailer park on the radar base, and the base was littered with children. We'd play games like hide and seek in the bushes around the park. Hide and seek was one of my favorite games, that and building tree forts. I didn't realize back then that I had an advantage over the other children. They just knew I was good for being such a little kid. When it was my turn to be the seeker, I can remember looking towards the grove of willows where we liked to hide, and then I would concentrate briefly, slow down my thinking, and really look at the tree branches that line the perimeter. If I waited long enough, which was only about 10 or 20 seconds, I could see two trails. At first, I would notice a soft and sort of sparkly, thick, greenish haze still clinging to and dripping off and around the leaves and branches of some trees. From that, I knew someone had walked that way recently. I could also tell where the person had walked because the tree's energy was slightly disrupted. I remember asking the tree if this was the right way, and maybe I imagined this. They would sort of whisper with the wind and show me the way. I could also feel out the trail and then would follow it to my hiding friend. When it was my turn to hide, I realized I could sort of make myself less visible. My great-grandfather, who was in spirit, showed me how to do this. I was only 4 years old when he explained this technique to me so I could stay out of the way when things got intense at home. He asked me to remember what it was like in my body when I was running around. I had noticed before that when I talked to someone or was playing hide and seek, my energy sped up. And when it was quiet and still, I could feel it slow down. Yes, like that, he'd say. He taught me that there were tiny living circles, beings of sorts in our bodies. He showed me what one looked like through a black and white drawing. Then he allowed, Then he allowed me to experience what one felt like. I could feel it breathing and pulsating. I could feel that it also had an intelligence and even a personality. I knew if I asked it a question, it could and would reply to me. The man continued, "These tiny light things, cells, are what make up our body, and you can make your cells slow down by taking a deep breath. It'll help." He asked me to be like a little rabbit hiding in the snow underneath some pine tree branches. He put the picture in my mind and let me feel how the bunny felt, all soft and quiet. He then let me feel a soft breeze on my face and told me to allow the movement of the air to surround me and then go through me. He showed my cells moving apart so that the quietness could get in between, then pass through me and out the back. Then he said to allow whatever objects were behind me to shine through those spaces that were between my cells so the person could see the environment seeping through me. That way the observer would only see the background and not my body. To help make the technique more successful, he explained that you shouldn't talk or look at anyone because they would be able to feel you looking at them. He added that for extra efficiency, I should put an imaginary blanket over my head and body too. I chose a furry pink one. I knew I still could be seen, but doing this lessened my chances of being caught. It also helped me being a small-bodied creature. I later used this talent when I was at university. For some strange reason, the dean decided she didn't like me. It wasn't just me who noticed that I was being picked on. Others in the class confessed to me they thought the same thing. I practiced this method in the class too. I slowed down my energy, let the air pass through me, and brought my background into the foreground. I also stopped answering questions to not draw attention to myself. I sat like a quiet little bunny. It worked so well that I got a 7 out of 10 for attendance, despite never having missed or even being late for one class. So far in my life, this technique has offered some element of protection from others. Apparently, this is my go-to move, and in hindsight, it's not always a productive stance. The next section, listening to nature, different destinations, being 12 years old, 15 years old, and turning 30, is the beginning of my book, Chapter 1, Welcome to My World, and I hope you enjoyed sharing this with me. Have a good night.